What is going on YouTube? It's Andreas here from Symmetry 4-Wheel Drive. Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm super excited because we finally get to start fitting our Gobi-X Barwork to the 80 Series LandCruiser that's behind me here. So starting off with this whole part of the build series, what we are going to be doing is fitting the rock sliders to the 80 Series today. And the reason for that is I just thought it would probably be the simplest part of the Barwork to fit first, and I just really was so amped to get the stuff on the car, so I wanted to get whatever I could on as soon as possible. So what I'm going to do in this video is take you through the whole process of fitting these rock sliders to your 80 Series and what it all entails, and doing the job by yourself as opposed to having an extra set of hands. And I'll also just run you through all the tools that are needed to complete this job and any sort of other extras that you may need to complete this. So what we're going to do is jump into what is needed, and then we'll get into the actual DIY process. Let's get into it. So a couple of things that I really like about these Gobi-X Rock Sliders are how robust and how solid they are manufactured. I mean, the proof is in the pudding in just their weight alone, which comes in at about 20 kilograms. And as you can see, the mounting brackets that are fully welded onto the rock slider rail itself are super robust and boxed in nicely with full welds wherever they can be. And yeah, these are rock solid. I mean, excuse the pun, but it's just what they are. And they really are just manufactured super strongly and will definitely add a lot of protection to your vehicle. These LandCruiser laser cut panels that are just bolted to the side step part of the rock slide itself are a very nice touch as well. And this little Gobi-X logo here is very cool. These rock sliders are a nice balance between form and function, and I think they are very useful with the side step that is incorporated into them. So if you are performing this job by yourself in fitting these Gobi-X Rock Sliders, I found that these tools are what you will need to complete the job. So firstly, you would need a ratchet with a 19mm socket as well as a 19mm spanner, and that's for the actual hardware for the rock sliders themselves. Then a set of jack stands, or even a couple more if you have, so I used about 4 or 5 just to make it easier and adjust everything. That will also help you in fitting this by yourself if you don't have an extra set of hands. So I used about 4 or 5 of those just to make it easier. Then an extension can also help for your ratchet and the 19mm socket. Then for removing the OEM side steps that are on the car, you will just need a 12mm spanner, a 12mm socket, also one of these little 1/8 inch spanner handles or ratchet handles, and a 1/8 inch ratchet and a 12mm socket for that. Then we will also use some of this copper slip on the bolts that we remove for these OEM side steps, and that's just to put the bolts and the nuts back in place once we remove the steps, that no grime and mud and everything else that you'll find off-road gets in there and starts to corrode away where those holes are. So we just put those bolts that fit the side steps back in there just to close up those holes again. So lastly, this is the rock slider itself. So when it comes to any vehicle or anything regarding performance on a vehicle, weight is always one of the biggest contributing factors to performance. So with any of these products that I want to put on my 80 series, I'm very aware of what they weigh and what that is going to affect on the vehicle. So with these rock sliders in particular, removing these OEM side steps, these probably weigh about 2 kilos. I mean, they don't even really pick up on the scale that I'm using, but just from picking them up, they are super lightweight. I mean, you can, with 2 fingers here, just lift that. It's really a lightweight item, and we just want to have a look at what these Gobi-X Rock Sliders weigh so that we can see what weight we are adding to the vehicle. So what I'm going to do is just pop these rock sliders onto the scale and see what weight we get for them, so that I can see what weight I'm adding to the vehicle. This will affect your GVM, it will affect performance, all sorts of things like that. So I'm just interested to know what they weigh, and I'll be weighing all the items that I put on my car. I know what weight the wheels have added to the car, and now we'll see what weight these rock sliders add as well. So we are just going to weigh this rock slider quickly, just to get a weight. So the reading we get here on the scale is 20.2 kilograms. So with a rock slider either side, that will equal 40 kilograms we added to the vehicle, and minus the 2 side steps, it would equal about 35-36 kilos that we are adding to the vehicle with these rock sliders. So our first step in the process of installing our rock sliders is removing the old OEM side steps. So that is quite a simple process, and the side steps themselves are super light, only probably about 2 to 3 kilos, so that's not an issue at all. And what that is 4 brackets that are found along the length of the side step, and those each have 2 bolts that are holding them. I hope you can see there. So 2 of them are studs just to make removing and installing them easier, and the other 6 will be bolts. So you will be removing 6 bolts and 2 nuts. All of them are really easy to get to, and you can just undo them using your 12mm ratchet. But the last one, the bolt, is very close to the body mount at the rear. I'll just show you that quickly, and that can be quite a tricky struggle to get to, but other than that, it is a super simple job to remove these OEM side steps. So if you have a look here, this body mount is quite close to where this bolt on the inside of this bracket is to remove the side steps, and this is towards the rear of the car, and that is just a tricky one to get out. But other than that, all of them are super simple to do. So let's jump into removing those. So what we're going to do now is just start removing all these bolts and nuts that hold on the side step. So if we have a look up here, that is the bolt that's difficult to get to because of this body mount. So you can't really fit a ratchet, even a 1/8 inch ratchet, in there because of where this body mount is. So a spanner and little turns at a time will get that bolt out. This one's a lot easier because it's below this body mount, and that's the rear bracket for these side steps. I must say I like the clearance that the car has without any side steps or rock sliders with the 35s, but I do want those sills to be protected. So we have removed those side steps and put the bolts back in with some copper slip. So now we can actually move on to the exciting part, which is installing the Gobi-X Rock Sliders. Feeling the weight of these OEM side steps, there really is no protection at all offered by them. I mean, they will literally crumble like tinfoil at the nearest site of a rock or something similar, where these Gobi-X Rock Sliders will actually provide some real world protection for the sills on the 80. So you'll notice on these rock sliders, these brackets go out at an angle, and the brackets get longer towards the front of the rock slider. And I'll show you here on the chassis of the vehicle. So the angle of those brackets and how they are tapered and set longer at the front and shorter towards the rear are for the chassis rail here, and that has an angle to it, so that allows the brackets to sit flush on the chassis and allow the rock slider to be straight and flush with the sills of the vehicle. So what we are going to do now is place the rock slider on top of these jack stands and just roughly align it sitting here in situ with the vehicle, so that we can get on the other side and then start loosely putting the mounting hardware on so that we can get it in place. So now that we have the rock slider sitting roughly in place in relation to the vehicle and where it needs to mount to, what we are going to do is get under the vehicle from the other side and then start adjusting the jack stands so that we can put on some of this mounting hardware loosely, and that will roughly align our rock slider to where we need to be before we start tightening it up. So we're going to get under the vehicle and just start playing around with the jack stands and getting the rock slider in place. A nice touch with the mounting hardware for this Gobi-X Rock Slider is that it's made from stainless steel, which means it won't corrode and rust majorly over time under the vehicle. So here we can see the rock slider and its brackets sitting in place on the jack stands, and what we're going to do now is just adjust the height of these jack stands, because as you can see the brackets are sitting quite a bit lower than the chassis. So we're just going to bring that up, raise it up so that we can slip in these U-bolts and roughly just get the rock slider in place. So we're just going to start adjusting where the rock slider is sitting to get it closer to where we want it to be. So over here we have one of the U-bolts roughly in place and just slipped through the rock slider bracket, and what we are going to do is just get a washer and a nut and just finger tight that on so that the rock slider can't fall off, and then we can start doing the same on the rear and the front brackets here. So if we have a look here, we have just put a nut and a washer on this side of the U-bolt and also on the top over here. So that is our center bracket loosely in place on the rock slider, and what we'll do now is just move and adjust the jack stands and just lift the rock slider up, and then do that on the rear and the front brackets as well. So we are just busy on this front bracket now, getting the U-bolt in. I'm going to add a washer and a nut on the bottom one. and just finger tight that. Same with the top one. I'm gonna add a washer. And a nut. So that is the front one done, just loosely hand tightened with its bracket. So what I'm going to do is tighten all of these nuts on the U bolts, and what I'm going to do is just tighten them almost all the way but not fully tightened, because you want to do that sort of in sequence between them so that the rock slider pulls onto the chassis equally. You don't want to fully tighten one side and then the next, because that will sort of pull and distort everything. You want to bring it all together onto the chassis equally and as together as possible. So we'll just get through that now. So now that we have all three of those in place and the rock slider secured by them, we can start moving the rock slider to where we want it to sit before fully tightening it down. So looking at where our rock slider is sitting at the moment, I'm thinking that it needs to come about an inch or 25 millimeters forward. So what we're going to do is just shift the whole rock slider a bit more forward where we think will be the optimal place for it, and just make sure that those brackets are sitting nice and flush on that angle on the chassis, and we will just get it in place and then we can start tightening it all up. So if we have a look here, when I was trying to move the rock slider into the optimal position, the exhaust was actually touching on this bracket, and this exhaust has been changed to aftermarket at some point in this car's lifespan, and obviously that has dropped down a bit, which means it clashes with this bracket of the rock slider. So in order to move the rock slider into the position that I needed and wanted, what I did was just jack up the exhaust just by about 10 millimeter or so, just so I could shift the rock slider to where it needs to be, so that that's no longer clashing, and then I'll just move the exhaust up just ever so slightly, or do a notch in the bracket itself here just to miss this exhaust. And there is plenty of meat on that for me to make a notch out of there to accommodate for the exhaust, so I'll have a look and see what I'll do there, just to not have any rattles or anything like that, or for the bracket to maybe rub and wear through the exhaust in that point. So I will address that at a later stage. So this is the notch we cut out of the rock slider mounting bracket to clear our exhaust on the driver's side there. So what we are going to do here now is just make sure the rock slider is exactly where we want it to be, and then once it's in place, then we can get back under the car and tighten up those bolts to set the position of the rock slider. That's all looking good. So now we're going to jump under the car with our 19mm ratchet with socket and our 19mm spanner. It's on and off drizzling now at the moment, and you know, the weather has not been great at all. but come rain or shine, I will fit these rock sliders to the car today. That's just how excited I am to get them on the vehicle and start moving along with all the products we're fitting to the 80 series build. So we have all of the bolts snugly tightened down and the whole rock slider brought onto the chassis nice and equally. So what we're going to do now is the final tightening and torquing of the bolts. So there we have it, guys. As you can see here, all the U-bolts are tightened around the chassis and secured onto the rock slider brackets, and the rock sliders are now fully tightened and in place. So here we can see how the rock sliders are attached to the chassis here. The passenger side will just be a opposite hand version of the driver's side rock slider. So we'll just jump into that and I'll let you know of any things I encounter there. So here we have it. We have installed the passenger side rock sliders on the 80 series, and it was a relatively simple install on that side as well. There is just one thing to note that I will mention now. So when installing the rock sliders on the passenger side of the 80 series, one thing to note is that the brake lines are attached to the chassis on the inside of the chassis rail, and in order to get your U brackets over that, you need to undo the retaining tabs that hold the brake lines to the chassis so that you can slip the U-bolt in between the chassis and the brake line in order not to clamp and, you know, damage your brake lines in any way. So you just need to slip your U-bolts in between the brake line and the chassis as shown here. I'll just make up some spaces to put between the mounting tab and the chassis to offset them and leave some space for the rock slider U-bolts and mounting hardware. There was this one bracket that holds the brake lines in between the fuel tank and the chassis rail that was very difficult to remove just because of its position and there being no space there, but it just takes a little bit of finessing and time. But other than that, it wasn't a major issue. It was just a bit of a finicky little job to remove that mounting tab for the brake lines. So the only point of interference on the passenger side is the brake lines. Now this is something I have been waiting to do. Peeling off this protective covering on the laser cut LandCruiser panels on the slider. So guys, that about wraps up our install video of the Gobi-X Rock Sliders onto our 80 series LandCruiser, and overall the install was really simple and really easy to do, even by yourself with the help of a couple jack stands. There was really nothing too difficult about it at all, and I think that's just a testament to how the product was designed and made. A couple of the things that I really like about these Gobi-X Rock Sliders is just how well they fit the vehicle and how easy they are to install. And with that being said, their aesthetic really complements the vehicle's lines and adds a nice tough and robust appearance and off-road sort of ruggedness to the whole package, and it looks fantastic on the vehicle. Another thing is just how strong and how robust they are designed and manufactured. They really are built to a high standard and a high quality, and their finish is also just top notch. I can't fault it there. And another cool feature is the incorporation of the high lift jack points into the rock sliders themselves, which will be really useful out in the trails and in tricky situations. And I really just am stoked with how the whole process and finish came out on the vehicle. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video and that it's maybe helped you if you are looking to install a set of these yourself on your 80 series or any other similar vehicle, and I hope that it provided you some good information and some good feedback on the Gobi-X Rock Sliders and their products. Without keeping you any longer, I'd just like to say thank you again to Gobi-X for hooking us up with these, and now we can finally show you what they look like on the car. Catch you soon in the next one. Cheers. Stop it. Honey.